They said the house was on hold, that no one was doing anything until we all agreed. I believed them, until the contractor called me asking for my signature for Phase 3. I was mid-email toggling between quarterly reports and our program's annual budget review when my phone lit up with a Georgia area code I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Most unexpected calls from that part of the country were either political spam or family drama I didn't have time for. But something in me, maybe instinct, maybe muscle memory, made me tap accept. "Hi, is this Ms. Callan Drummond?" the voice asked, overly polite, in the way contractors are when they're about to talk money. This is she. "Hey there. I'm calling from Baystone Homeworks. We're the general contractor handling the Drummond Street renovation. We're wrapping up Phase 2 this week and just wanted to confirm approval for Phase 3 before we move forward. We'll need your initials on the new budget line items and permitting updates." I blinked. "Sorry, what did you say this was for? The Riverwood property, 1127 Drummond Street. You're listed as managing partner and financial backer." I sat up straighter in my chair, heartbeat shifting from curious to alert. "Phase 3, I thought this project was on hold." He hesitated. "I'm not sure who told you that, ma'am, but our crew's been on site 6 days a week since January. Your sister Shauna's been coordinating materials and access. We're just waiting on your green light for the next tier." I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the spreadsheet in front of me, its tidy columns suddenly meaningless. For a moment, I just sat there, jaw tight, fingers resting above the keyboard, the sound of my breath suddenly louder than it had been all day. My name is Callan Drummond. I'm 30 years old, live in Richmond, Virginia, and work as a financial compliance coordinator for a nonprofit that helps low-income communities get access to affordable housing. I spend my days making sure every grant dollar is accounted for and every line item justified. I believe in fairness, in documentation, in doing the right thing even when no one's watching, which is probably why my family thought I wouldn't notice. The house in question sat 3 states away in the Georgia neighborhood where I spent most of my childhood summers. An aging 2-story with fading blue shutters and a wraparound porch my grandmother had painted herself. When she passed 2 years ago, she left it in trust to her 3 granddaughters, me, Shauna, and Marla, with the understanding that we'd figure out what to do with it together. Shauna, the oldest, at 34, had always been the loudest in family discussions, the one with plans that rarely matched her bank account. Marla, 2 years younger than me, floated somewhere between agreeable and evasive depending on who she was talking to. When we decided last spring to renovate the house and sell it, I offered to handle the financing legwork, getting pre-approval, managing the bank paperwork, and yes, temporarily putting my name on the line of credit tied to the property. But only with shared decisions I'd said on our video call, the one where we each promised transparency and regular check-ins. Of course, Shauna had replied, a little too quickly, "No one's doing anything without looping everyone in." Fast forward 8 months. We'd had one more call 2 months ago, just after New Year's. They said the timeline was paused. Shauna had claimed delays with materials, said the contractor wasn't ready to move forward until permits were cleared. "We'll regroup in spring," she told me. "No one's doing anything big yet." I believed her. I didn't even ask for follow-up emails. I was up to my neck in year-end reports at work and dealing with an HVAC system that had given up mid-January. Honestly, it was a relief to take something off my plate. I trusted them. Or maybe I just didn't want to believe they'd go behind my back. Now I was staring at the realization that construction hadn't just resumed, it had been charging full speed ahead, under my name, with my signature. My phone buzzed again. A follow-up text from the contractor. "Can you confirm a good time to sign off attached current expense breakdown and revised plans?" I opened the PDF. It was 9 pages long, complete with stamped city permits, a material receipt for quartz countertops, and a labor invoice for electrical rewiring, all under Drummond Family Holdings, LLC. I hadn't even heard of that name, but there on the bottom of the form was my name, Callan Drummond, listed as managing partner and financial primary. I felt like the air had shifted in the room. This wasn't a simple mistake. This was a system set up in my name, moving under my radar, with just enough plausible deniability to keep me quiet. At least that's what they were counting on. I sat back in my chair, hands folded tight in my lap. My fingers were cold, but my thoughts were suddenly sharp. They hadn't paused the project. They'd paused me. I looked around my apartment, small but spotless, tucked above a bookstore on the edge of the Fan District. On my bookshelf, a photo of the three of us from last summer, Shauna holding a cocktail, Marla mid-laugh, and me smiling but off-center like I'd already started drifting to the edges of my own family. This wasn't about miscommunication. It wasn't a clerical error. It was a choice, a deliberate, quiet one. I pulled up our last group text thread. Nothing since February, just a meme Marla had sent, and a LOL from Shauna. Nothing about permits, nothing about quartz countertops or rewiring or moving forward. I scrolled back further. That video call in January, the one where they said everything was on hold, no urgency, just Shauna chewing gum while Marla painted her nails on camera. Casual, warm, false. I was supposed to be the financial safety net, the responsible one, the one who says yes when no one else qualifies. I'd been useful, until it was more convenient to use me without asking. Now they were 3 phases in with a house nearly finished and a contractor ready to start the final push, expecting me to smile and sign like I'd been there the whole time. They were wrong. I closed the PDF, opened my notes app, and typed the first line of what would become a different kind of checklist. Not a budget this time, not a renovation schedule. Step 1. Find out exactly what they've done in my name. And then, step 2, make sure they regret it. The morning after the contractor's call, I texted Shauna before my second cup of coffee. I didn't lead with emotion, just facts. Hey, just heard from Baystone. They say phase 3 is ready. I thought we agreed everything was paused. Her response came fast, too fast. Huh, that's weird. Must be a miscommunication. I'll follow up. No punctuation, no apology, just that low-effort kind of text people send when they're hoping you won't dig deeper. I waited. She didn't follow up. By noon, I texted again. Did you talk to them? She left me on read. I tried Marla next. If Shauna was the steam engine, Marla was the silence between whistles. She didn't stir the pot, but she never stopped anyone from lighting the burner either. Her reply came with a string of emojis. Oh, wow, really? I didn't know they were moving ahead already. That was her way, vague, a little confused, perfectly non-committal. It wasn't even frustrating anymore, just predictable. I called Mom. Rita Drummond answered on the 3rd ring with her usual breezy, tired voice, half sermon, half soap opera. Hey, baby girl. How's Virginia? I'm fine. Working. Got a weird call yesterday about the house. She paused. Oh, contractor says they're ready for phase 3. Did you know they've been working nonstop? Another pause. I don't know all the details. That's between y'all 3. I stay out of the business side. You girls said you'd handle it. Right, but we also said no one would move forward unless we agreed. She sighed, long and maternal. This family's always worked it out. Ain't no point making noise over every little hiccup. Maybe they just got excited. You know your sisters, big ideas, short patience. I stared at the wall above my kitchen sink, watching the morning light drift through the blinds. Mom, this isn't a hiccup. My name is on those permits. You're always so serious, Callan. So by the book? I know you mean well, baby, but sometimes family just works differently. I didn't answer right away. I was used to this particular tone, the one that meant, you're not wrong, but you're ruining the mood. She filled the silence. You were always the one who kept things tight. Your grandma used to say, Kalin folds her socks before folding her dreams. I almost laughed. That sounded exactly like Grandma May. And it was true. When I was 9, I color-coded my weekly chores list. At 13, I tracked my allowance on a notebook ledger with columns and formulas. Shauna called me the tiny accountant, half mocking, half impressed. Marla just asked me to track hers, too. In high school, while they both scraped by in summer jobs and bought clothes on layaway, I saved up for a used Toyota and drove myself to college campus tours. No one noticed then, not really. They just assumed I'd always be fine. The boring one, the reliable one, the one who didn't ask for much and somehow got even less. But I remembered everything. I remembered co-signing Shauna's first car loan because she needed a fresh start after her second divorce. I remembered floating Marla $1,000 for medical bills that turned out to be elective liposuction. I remembered Mom's electric bill that got lost in the mail and how I quietly paid it 3 months in a row without saying a word. I never asked for anything back. I just wanted them to treat me like I wasn't invisible. Or worse, like I was just a credit score in a cardigan. I opened my laptop and sat at the dining table, the one I turned into my remote office since COVID. I pulled up my email inbox and searched for keywords, Baystone Drummond Holdings renovation contract. Nothing new in the last 60 days. I checked my spam folder, junk, then the bank. No unusual charges, no flagged transactions. My credit card balance looked normal. No new auto pay setups or linked accounts. It didn't make sense. If someone was pushing a $90,000 renovation, why wasn't the money moving? Then I remembered last year I'd authorized a business credit line for the house, under the agreement that all charges would go through the family group vote, and I had allowed the card to remain on file for convenience, trusting that I'd get an alert for every major transaction. Had they changed the email redirected notifications, I clicked into the bank portal settings. Account email still showed mine. Mobile alert preferences looked the same. Nothing obvious, out of place. It made me feel crazy, like walking into a room and knowing something's missing, but all the furniture's still there. I checked the Dropbox folder we set up when we started the renovation project. There hadn't been a new file in months. Then I noticed something I'd overlooked before, a subfolder labeled Budget Drafts V2, created by Shauna 6 weeks ago. I clicked through. Inside 4 spreadsheets, budget outlines, updated contractor quotes, phase-by-phase line items. The most recent one was titled Final Use This. I opened it, and there it was, $89,000 broken into labeled categories: flooring, electrical appliances, labor. In the notes column, approved by CD, my initials. Except I never saw this file before, never opened it, never approved a thing. I sat there staring at the screen. They had gone ahead without me. They'd used my name again and counted on me not noticing. I felt the familiar tightness at the base of my neck, the kind that meant I was trying too hard to stay calm. I reached for my phone again, typed out a text to Shauna. Found the final budget file. My initials are on it. Did you add those? The bubble blinked for a moment, then disappeared. No reply. I didn't text again. Instead, I opened a fresh document on my computer and labeled it Fraud Investigation Personal Notes. I began typing dates, file names, phone numbers, amounts, because if they thought I'd stay quiet again, they were about to learn what happened when the boring sister stopped playing nice. The flight to Georgia was quiet. I didn't bring a book. I didn't sleep. Just stared out the window, letting the hum of the engines dull the edge of my thoughts. I'd booked the ticket less than 12 hours after opening that spreadsheet. One way, no bags checked, just a carry-on with a laptop, a notebook, and the tight coil of suspicion that had settled in my chest like smoke, refusing to lift. Riverwood hadn't changed much since Grandma May passed. Same canopy of elms lining the narrow streets, same creaky mailboxes and leaning porch swings. The neighborhood was old, stubborn, and slow to gentrify. That's what we used to love about it. No matter what the world's doing, Riverwood stays put, Grandma used to say. It stayed put, all right, until now. I turned onto Drummond Street just after noon on Saturday. It should have been a quiet block. But even before I reached the house, I could hear the whine of power tools. Then I saw it. 1127 Drummond, our grandmother's house. Only it didn't look like her house anymore. The cracked gravel driveway was gone, replaced by a freshly poured concrete path still roped off with orange tape. The porch, once sagging slightly to the left, now stood reinforced and repainted in a bright colonial white. The old shutters had been replaced. A stack of stainless steel appliances sat just beyond the open front door, shrink-wrapped and gleaming like they had been plucked straight from a showroom. There were painters inside. 2 men in overalls with paint-speckled boots rolled smooth gray along the living room walls, colors that had never touched this house before. I parked across the street and stared. Phase 3. No, this was almost done. The front yard had been leveled. New sod had been laid on one side. The flower beds had mulch. Mulch. I stepped out slowly, half waiting for someone to jump out from behind a column and yell surprise like this was some kind of grand reveal. But no one did. There was a work van pulled up near the side, so I walked toward it. A man in a dusty green polo shirt and cargo pants stood beside it, talking into a headset and flipping through a clipboard. "Excuse me," I said. He looked up, mid-40s, shaved head tan lines around his eyes, like someone who spent most of his time outside. He gave me a polite nod. "Can I help you?" "Yes, I hesitated, then decided to go all in. "I'm Callan Drummond. This is my grandmother's house." His expression didn't change. "Oh, sure. Yeah, we've been expecting you to stop by eventually." "You have?" "Well, he shrugged your names on the permit." I felt that sentence in my stomach. "I'm Travis, site foreman with Baystone. We've been working this one since January. Honestly, it's been smooth sailing, which is rare. Your sister's been on site most days. She's got a good eye. Picked out the hardware herself." I didn't answer. My eyes were still on the doorway, the shimmer of sunlight hitting polished tile that had replaced the scuffed hardwood floors Grandma never got around to refinishing. "Appliances are going in today," Travis continued, oblivious. "We'll be doing counters tomorrow, then final inspection in about 2 weeks if all goes according to plan." I blinked. "Inspection? Yup, to get the occupancy certificate cleared. After that, staging crew comes in and the listing goes live. Should pull in a great number in this neighborhood." He smiled. "Honestly, whoever picked the finishes did their homework. It's gonna sell quick." I swallowed hard. "I wasn't told any of this." He furrowed his brow. "You weren't?" "No." He paused. "But you're the managing partner, right?" "That's what the documents say." Now he looked uncomfortable. "Look, I'm just the contractor. We got everything signed and sealed weeks ago. We've been submitting invoices to the LLC. Drummond Family Holdings, right?" I said more to myself than to him. Travis hesitated. "I mean, I can call your sister if you want. She's usually around until noon most days." "No, don't, please." He nodded, stepping back slightly, giving me space. "You want to walk through the place? We're finishing the master bath today. Tiling's gorgeous." I shook my head. "No, I just needed to see it." He watched me for a second, then returned to his clipboard, stepping away with practiced tact. I stood there for another minute watching one of the workers hoist a marble countertop from a truck bed. It looked heavy, solid, permanent. It used to be just a house, a place where my grandmother made tea with too much sugar, where we shelled peas on the back steps and played dominoes after dinner. Now it looked like a magazine spread. And I had no idea what it had cost financially, emotionally, legally. All I knew was that it was happening without me under my name. I turned back toward my rental car, pulled open the door, and sat behind the wheel. It was past time for answers, but first I needed to gather proof, every invoice, every permit, every signature they thought I wouldn't find. If this was their game, I was done playing defense. They wanted to renovate the house. Fine. I'd renovate the rules. The building permit was taped inside the living room window, flapping slightly behind the glass with every breeze that passed through the open doorway. I stepped closer, squinting at the document's faded ink, barely legible through the glare. But the name printed at the bottom, bold and clear, couldn't be mistaken: Managing Partner Callan Drummond. I stood there for a long time, the world around me suddenly muted, just the hum of power tools in the background, and the slow buzz in my ears. It wasn't theoretical anymore. It wasn't just a spreadsheet or a verbal misdirection. My name was literally posted in the window of a house I hadn't set foot in for over a year. Not just as a co-owner, as the responsible party. Back at the hotel, I dropped my keys on the desk and sat down hard on the edge of the bed, scrolling through my phone until I found the number on the contractor's card Travis had handed me earlier. The line rang 3 times before someone picked up. Baystone Homeworks, this is Michelle. Hi, Michelle. My name is Callan Drummond. I believe I'm listed as the managing partner on a project you're currently working, 1127 Drummond Street. A pause. Keys clacking. Yes, ma'am. Let me pull that up. Okay, yes. That's under Drummond Family Holdings, LLC. What can I help you with? I need to confirm who approved the current budget, I said carefully. And under what financial credentials? Sure. Just a moment. More clacking. Then the budget was signed off via DocuSign on January 8th, approved under the LLC account. The line of credit is tied to the primary financial contact, also listed as Callan Drummond. I felt my spine stiffen. And when was that credit line activated? December 12th. Would you like me to forward the documents? Yes, please. Every file you have on record agreements, invoices, receipts, anything associated with that address or that LLC. Sure thing. Sending it to the email we have on file. That would be cdrummanfinance@gmail.com. I froze. That was my old email, one I'd used in grad school. I hadn't checked it regularly in almost 3 years. Yes, I said slowly. Send it there. I'll follow up. I hung up and immediately logged into the old account. It was a graveyard of newsletters and forgotten logins, but buried between coupon spam and alumni updates was an inbox folder labeled Baystone Docs. 37 unread emails. The earliest dated back to mid-December. My sisters or someone had been forwarding construction updates and contractor threads to an account they knew I no longer used. Just enough to technically notify me. Just enough to say, well, we looped her in. I opened the latest message. Subject, Phase 3. Approval, cabinetry, finalization, attachment PDF with my signature. Again, scanned. The signature looked like mine, but I hadn't signed anything since August, and definitely not this. I downloaded every file, backups on both laptop and external drive. I created a spreadsheet to catalog the invoices by date amount and payee. Most payments were from the LLC checking account opened in January, funded by a $50,000 credit line issued under my name, and a second capital injection labeled Owner Contribution CD. They'd used my name, my credit, my trust, and I hadn't known a damn thing. I leaned back in the desk chair and stared at the ceiling. It was the same grainy plaster every mid-range hotel in America seemed to have. The room smelled faintly of bleach and coffee. Somewhere down the hall, a kid was whining through a TV show. Life went on, and so had they without me. My phone buzzed. A text from Shauna. Everything okay? I didn't answer, because no, everything was not okay. They had built this whole thing literally on the assumption that I'd be too busy, too trusting, or too tired to check. That I'd play the same role I always had the responsible one, the helper, the fallback plan, the silent signature at the bottom of every family mess. I thought of Shauna's voice on that call last year when she'd said she was drowning in legal fees from her second divorce and just needed a little help. Just this once, Callan, she'd said. You know I wouldn't ask unless I really needed it. I'd wired her the money the next morning. She never paid it back, never even brought it up again. That was the moment I should have known. The moment I should have realized help in my family wasn't help, it was expected, was quiet, invisible support with no end date and no gratitude, a permanent line of credit on my empathy. I closed my laptop and stood up. My body felt too still, like the weight of the truth hadn't yet caught up to my limbs. But it would. I walked over to the window. From the third floor, I could just make out the curve of the Riverwood Parkway in the distance, lined with trees whose roots had started cracking the sidewalks long ago. They said the house was on hold. They said no one was doing anything until we all agreed. They lied. And now I was going to find out exactly how deep the foundation of that lie ran before it caved in underneath them. Back in Richmond, the first thing I did was pull the blinds closed. I hadn't been gone more than 48 hours, but the apartment felt stale and unfamiliar, like it had absorbed the unease I brought home with me. I had dropped my suitcase near the door, kicked off my shoes, and turned on the kettle out of habit, not because I wanted tea, but because I needed the sound of something boiling, something real. My laptop was still on the dining table where I'd left it. I opened it and went straight to the shared Google Drive folder we had created last year when we first started talking about the renovation. It had been my idea to organize everything in one place, contracts, receipts, planning documents, because I thought transparency would protect everyone. I thought structure would keep us honest. I hadn't accounted for what happens when people use structure as a weapon. The main folder hadn't been updated in months, but tucked inside was a subfolder called Archives. I clicked through and found a familiar file name, Drummond Renovation Master Agreement. PDF. It had been updated in January. I opened it. It was a full contractor agreement stamped and signed, dated January 8th. At the bottom of page 6 was a familiar scribble, my signature. Or rather, an image of it, pasted in slightly skewed just a few pixels off from where it would have landed if I'd signed it myself. It wasn't the first time I'd seen that scan. I was the one who created it. Last summer, when we first applied for pre-approval, I'd uploaded a high-resolution scan of my signature so I could e-sign initial documents quickly. I sent it to Shauna once through Slack with the note only for the credit app. Don't use anywhere else. I even put the word only in all caps. I remember because she responded with a laughing emoji and said, "Geez, you don't trust your own sister." Apparently I shouldn't have. I scrolled through the rest of the PDF. The details were meticulous. Renovation budget $89,000. Lender Southern Gate Credit Union. Collateral property at 1127 Drummond Street held under Drummond Family Holdings, LLC, managed by Callan Drummond. Managed, not co-managed. Not representative, sole managing partner. They'd built the legal shell around me. Filed the paperwork, opened the LLC, and used my name to access funding, all using templates. I had created systems, I had set up tools, I had designed to make our lives easier. They hadn't just lied, they used me. I sat very still, letting the words settle like ash on the edge of my thoughts. There's a specific kind of betrayal that comes not from being left out, but from being included without your knowledge when you're the foundation someone builds on, without asking whether you want to carry the weight. When they don't even check if you're strong enough. They just assume you'll hold. I stood and walked to the printer tucked beneath the bookshelf. It had barely been used this year, just the occasional IRS letter or rental contract. But tonight it churned to life with a slow, hungry hum. I printed the agreement, each page sliding out warm and sharp. When it was done, I spread the papers across the table, smoothing them flat like a crime scene reconstruction. Because that's what it was, a blueprint of betrayal. A map showing exactly how far they'd gone without me. There were lines I remembered drafting myself in a version from last May language I'd pulled from a nonprofit grant contract and repurposed to make our documents feel more official. They hadn't even bothered to rewrite them, just copied and pasted, swapped the names, and filled in new dates. They'd used my tools, my templates, my trust. My phone buzzed. Another message from Shauna Hay. Want to talk this out? No drama, just a convo. I didn't answer. I was too busy turning betrayal into a paper trail. I opened my work laptop, created a new folder called Evidence Drummond LLC, and began collecting everything: the scanned signature, the contract metadata, the LLC registration forms pulled from Georgia's public business records. I took screenshots, labeled files, saved email chains, and downloaded spreadsheets. I wasn't angry, not in the way I used to be when Shauna bailed on plans or Marla forgot my birthday. This wasn't about hurt feelings. This was identity abuse, financial fraud. They didn't just make decisions without me. They stole my name and institutionalized it. They baked me into a business model I never agreed to join. I pulled out an old notebook from a drawer, hardcover, black, still half empty from when I used it during my MBA classes. I flipped to a clean page and wrote at the top, "Things they didn't think I'd notice signature, used on January 8th, document from Slack Image LLC, registered under my name, only credit line applied for, on Dexton 12 while I was in Seattle for the housing conference, shared folder, updated without notification, email redirected to old Gmail address, appliances delivered, receipt dated March 10th. Foreman says Shauna on site most days." I stared at the list for a while, then added one more line. They thought I'd be quiet. It was almost midnight. My tea had gone cold. The printer was silent now, but the air still buzzed with something I couldn't name. Something close to grief, but not quite. It wasn't about the money. Not really. I could afford the hit. What I couldn't afford was to keep pretending that being the responsible one meant staying silent when people used my responsibility against me. I closed the notebook, slid the papers into a file folder, and stacked everything neatly at the center of the table. Tomorrow, I was calling a lawyer. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I finally realized I was already in one. Callan didn't want to make the call. Not because she feared what her uncle might say, but because she already knew. The part that scared her was hearing it out loud. She stared at her phone for a few minutes, thumb hovering over the name Uncle Tyree Selret, her mother's older brother. Retired now, but for 38 years he'd been a licensed real estate agent and broker in Georgia. He had helped dozens of families through inheritance messes, quiet land disputes, and more than one shady probate deal. If anyone could help untangle what Shauna and Marla had done, it was him. When the line picked up, she heard the familiar rasp of his voice. Well, the niece who only calls when something's broken. She exhaled, relieved. "Hi, Uncle Ty." "You all right?" "No," she said honestly. "I need your help. Say no more." "You in trouble or just knee-deep in family foolishness?" "Both." "Then come on. Talk." She told him everything. From the contractor's call to the signature, she hadn't signed the LLC registration and the scanned contract. She didn't cry. She didn't rant. Just laid it out like a crime scene, measured and clean. When she finished, there was silence on the line. Then Uncle Tyree gave a long, slow whistle. "Damn. Your mama's girls really went and did it this time. I need to know how far it goes," she said. "Who set it up, who filed what, and whether I have a legal way out." "You've got more than that," he said flatly. "You've got grounds for civil and criminal action." Using someone's name without authorization for financial gain. That's fraud, plain and simple. I didn't want to escalate it. You didn't escalate anything. They did. You're responding. She could picture him now seated on that back porch in Macon coffee, in one hand, laptop in the other. Even retired Uncle Ty kept records sharp and instincts sharper. Text me the LLC name, he said. Full name, state of registration, and the date if you have it. She sent the screenshot within seconds. Okay, he muttered on his end. Pulling up the Georgia Secretary of State database now. Let's see. A few keystrokes later, she heard the tone in his voice shift. Well, look at this. Registered January 5th, filing agent Shauna Drummond. That your sister? Yes. Title, organizer. Marla Drummond listed as secretary. And here's the kicker, managing partner Callan Drummond. Her stomach clenched. She already knew it, but hearing him say it made it real. So they just wrote my name in and moved forward, looks like it. No Ian listed, which means they may have piggybacked off your personal SSN for bank access. And if that's the case, he let out a breath. They're dumber than I thought and more reckless than I feared. Can you email me the filing report? Already done, he said. You'll have it in 60 seconds. Callan refreshed her inbox. The file came through instantly, an official state PDF with digital timestamps and every field neatly filled in. Her name sat like a stain in the managing partner line. No attached signature, just inclusion. Silent, weighty, deliberate. First thing you do, Tyree said, is file a fraud alert with your bank and freeze any account attached to your name that you didn't open personally. Second, pull your credit reports from all 3 bureaus. If they used your name, once they might have used it again. You'll want documentation. She nodded, typing as he spoke. Third, he continued, don't let them know what you're doing. Not yet. Let them think you're still in the dark while you build your file. What about legal representation? You'll need it. But let's be smart. Quiet power, not loud drama. You prepare your case before they ever see the storm coming. After they hung up, Callan sat still for a long time. Her tea had gone cold again. She barely noticed. She pulled up her bank app and started flagging suspicious activity. The credit line tied to Drummond Family Holdings was right there under her name, active since December. She froze the associated account and filed a fraud alert, noting that her name and signature had been used without consent. She attached the scanned PDF. The system accepted it without question. Then she moved on to the credit bureaus. TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, one by one, she submitted the same request, place a freeze, on all new credit activity tied to her Social Security number, until further notice. The more she typed, the calmer she felt. Not because it wasn't terrifying, but because action gave shape to fear. She opened a new file on her laptop and began logging everything, dates, document names, email screenshots. It wasn't anger that drove her now. It was precision, focus. When she finally shut the laptop for the night, she glanced at the notebook still open on the table from the night before. She added a new line under her growing list of things they hadn't expected, 9. She had backup. She smiled just barely. The sisters might have built this house on lies, but Callan was building something of her own now. Not out of drywall and paint cans, but out of paper trails and legal threads, one quiet step at a time. And this time, she wasn't going to clean up after them. She was going to confront them with the truth documented and undeniable. Because if her name was going to be on anything, it would be on justice. We thought the listing was for next month. That's what Shauna said when we last spoke, if you could call her one-line texts, speaking. She claimed they were still sorting out permits, still finishing the last cosmetic touches, still waiting on some backsplash tile to come in from Charleston. But then I saw the post. It was a Sunday morning. I'd just finished grocery shopping and was scrolling through Instagram while my eggs boiled. That's when the algorithm served it up under the Riverwood restoration. The account wasn't one I followed, but the photos were unmistakable. Cream white walls, open concept kitchen, exposed beams I didn't approve, and there it was in the caption, "Open house today." 1127 Drummond St. Sark 4 p.m., listed by Kinsey and Moore Group, stunning modern revival in the heart of Riverwood. Don't miss this gem. There were 6 photos, all from angles meant to sell warmth and character, but all they sold me was rage. That kitchen, it wasn't supposed to have marble counters. That fireplace, I fought for it to stay brick. The old oak banister gone, replaced with glass and chrome. I booked a flight within 20 minutes. 2 hours later, I was at the airport, and by the time the afternoon light began pouring into the Riverwood neighborhood, I was stepping out of a rental car 4 houses down from what used to be my grandmother's porch. There were 3 other vehicles parked in the driveway. A small group of guests was chatting near the front steps with champagne flutes and gift bags. Shauna never missed a chance to turn something transactional into theater. I adjusted my blazer and tied my hair back. Nothing dramatic, just professional, like someone arriving at a listing they might buy or shut down. I approached slowly, noting the yard sign propped at an angle still dusted with mulch. For sale, Kinsey and Moore Group. Below it, a glossy flyer in a lucite box read, "Newly renovated, open concept, turnkey." I almost laughed. The front door was wide open, and the scent of fresh paint and staged lavender greeted me before I even stepped inside. They'd set candles, dimmed the overhead lights just enough to give that aspirational glow. I walked through the entry like any other prospective buyer, arms crossed slow steps. The floor creaked differently now. They'd replaced the old boards, covered the scuffs, sanded the memories away. In the kitchen, 3 women were admiring the cabinets. A man in a sport coat was talking about investment potential. And then there she was, Shauna, in heels, tight curls, bouncing, wearing a linen jumpsuit like she was the damn hostess of a brunch gala. She was mid-sentence with a young couple gesturing at the pantry when she caught sight of me. Her smile froze. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I wanted her to feel it. I kept walking, stepping through the living room, passing the fireplace they whitewashed without asking. I ran a finger along the edge of the mantel they installed to replace the one Grandma insisted was carved by our great-grandfather. Everything was cleaner now, more market-friendly, and colder. The guests were moving on, filtering through to the back deck, leaving me alone with her. She approached like someone trying not to panic. "Callan," she hissed under her breath. "What are you?" "You're touring a house that doesn't belong to you," I said flatly. Louder than a whisper. Quiet enough to not start a scene, yet loud enough to get noticed by a couple on the stairs. She blinked. "You can't just show up here." I didn't. "This is an open house," I said, gesturing at the sign outside. "Or did you not expect one of your investors to drop by?" She shifted arms, folding tight. "We needed to move things along." "You were being difficult. I was being careful," I corrected. "There's a difference. We all agreed." "No, we didn't. What we agreed on was transparency, shared decisions, renovate, then split. What you and Marla did was fraud." Her face twitched just slightly. She glanced behind her, checking if anyone else was still watching. "They don't care," I added. "These buyers, they don't know what's underneath the tile, but I do. I know what this house was built on, and I know how much of my name and credit and trust you've poured into these walls without permission." Shauna stepped closer, voice dropping. "You want to blow it up? Go ahead. You always did love the moral high ground." "No," I said, voice steady. "I just finally stopped cleaning up after people who climb over me to get there." She opened her mouth, but I was already walking away. I passed the realtor near the door, a blonde woman with an iPad in hand and confusion in her eyes. I smiled politely and picked up one of the flyers from the lucite box. Then I turned loud enough for everyone in the foyer to hear. Hi, I'm Callan Drummond, listed here as the managing partner of Drummond Family Holdings, LLC. Just wanted to clarify, for any of you making an offer today, you might want to hold off. Some legal things are still unsettled. Gasps. One couple froze in the hallway, another whispered. The realtor looked panicked. Shauna looked pale. I stepped outside, into the sharp Georgia sun, not needing to slam a door to make an impact. Because sometimes all it takes is telling the truth clearly, calmly, and with your whole chest. And sometimes, the most powerful scene at a party is the one where you leave standing tall, while everyone else scrambles to explain how you got there. The last of the guests filtered out in silence. No polite goodbyes, no thank yous for the tour, just sidelong glances, awkward murmurs, and the kind of retreat you make when you realize you have walked into something far messier than real estate. Inside the house, the air felt tighter. Callan stood near the living room archway, her leather folder held calmly in one hand. Shauna was pacing by the kitchen island, hands clenched and jaw tight. Marla had sunk into the edge of the cream-colored sectional arms-crossed eyes, flicking between her sisters. And their mother Rita had just stepped inside through the back patio door, pulled from whatever wine-sipping conversation she'd been having by the visible shift in energy. Cal and Rita began soft but already defensive. What's going on? Why are you? You should sit down, Callan interrupted, voice calm, almost clinical. All of you. Shauna scoffed. Oh, come on. Callan ignored her and unzipped the folder. Let's be clear. What you've done isn't just wrong, it's illegal. And I have the documentation to prove it. She laid out the first printout on the coffee table, a copy of the renovation loan agreement with her name as the primary borrower. This is the $89,000 loan taken in December. The collateral listed is this house. The borrower is me. I never authorized this. Next, a set of screenshots emails sent to the contractor, the scanned image of her signature clearly visible. These are the forged emails using an old signature scan I shared last year. Not only was it never meant for this project, it was never meant to be used without explicit permission. She slid over a copy of the LLC registration form. Drummond Family Holdings, LLC. Registered in Georgia. Managing partner me. Registered by Shauna. Secretary Marla. Shauna didn't even glance at the papers. She was too busy seething. Callan placed the final page down, slowly, IRS correspondence, showing the LLC had already generated a 1099 under her name. That's identity misuse, she said, and tax fraud. Marla let out a short breath somewhere between a gasp and a curse. I didn't know about the taxes, she whispered. Shauna exploded. Oh, don't play innocent now, Marla. You were there for every decision. Don't pretend like I masterminded the whole thing. I signed what you told me to sign, Marla snapped. You said Callan wouldn't mind. You said she'd thank us when it turned a profit. Callan watched them volley blame back and forth. She said nothing, just waited. Rita stepped forward, voice low and trembling. Girls, this isn't the place people can hear. No, Callan said. They need to hear it. I need to hear it. Shauna turned toward her. You want to talk about need. Her voice cracked not from weakness but rage. You always had more, Callan. Always. Scholarships, bonuses, a job that gave you stock options. You lived in a city. You had vacations. She gestured between herself and Marla. We stayed. We dealt with everything. We were the ones who cleaned out Grandma's attic when she passed. You swooped in twice a year with ideas and spreadsheets and judgment. Callan flinched but stayed steady. And somehow that justifies stealing my identity. It's not stealing. Shauna's voice broke again. It's family. We needed this. The bank wouldn't approve the loan under either of our names. You were the only one with credit. You were the only one who could have made this happen. And you didn't ask, Kaylin said quietly. You decided. Marla was sitting again, shoulders hunched. I just went along with it, she mumbled. I didn't think it would get this far. It always gets this far, Kaylin said. When no one draws a line. Rita stepped in now, her voice shaking but trying to be soothing. We didn't mean harm, baby. This is just how families do things. We lean on each other. No, Kaylin said sharply. This isn't leaning. This is theft. This is erasure. You made choices for me behind my back. You risked my financial future because it was easier than facing your own limits. Rita's eyes welled. Don't talk to your mama like that. Kaylin turned toward her more hurt than angry. Then don't let your daughters treat me like a bank account with a heartbeat. Silence. No one moved. The house around them, freshly renovated and artificially scented, suddenly felt hollow. Not a home, not even a memory, just drywall and deception. Shauna finally sat slamming her palm against her thigh. So what now? You sue us, you torch the whole thing. Go ahead, call the police. Ruin what little we were trying to build. Kaylin looked at her for a long moment. You already ruined it. I'm just not going to pretend everything's fine. Marla's voice was barely a whisper. We thought we could fix it before you noticed. Pay it back, set it right. You didn't even tell me it was happening, Kaylin said. You didn't give me the chance to say no. Or yes. You just made me disposable. The folder now closed the documents back inside. Kaylin stood and tucked it under her arm. I'm not here to blow things up, she said, but I won't be silenced. And I won't be complicit. She walked toward the door. None of them stopped her, because they knew. She was done cleaning up after them. She wasn't the boring sister anymore. She was the one holding the truth, and now everyone else had to live in the house, built on it. The next morning, Kaylin arrived at the house again, not in silence this time, but with purpose. The sun was high and sharp, cutting through the Georgia humidity like truth through denial. She wore navy slacks, a crisp button-down and flats. No need to dress like a lawyer, just someone who meant business, someone who finally understood what boundaries felt like. Shauna and Marla were already inside. The house still smelled like lavender staging spray, but the mood was heavier now, stripped of all pretense. Kaylin stepped into the living room where they sat, shoulders tense, eyes wary. I wanted to be clear. She began setting her folder back down on the now bare coffee table. Yesterday wasn't a scene. It was a warning. Shauna scoffed under her breath, but Kaylin didn't even glance at her. I spoke to my lawyer last night, she continued. The LLC is now under legal freeze. No activity can happen until ownership and identity issues are resolved. Marla blinked. Legal freeze. It means nothing can be sold, signed, or leveraged under that name, Kaylin explained. I also filed a formal dispute with the lender regarding the $89,000 renovation loan. The bank's fraud department is opening a case, and pending review, they've halted any further disbursement. Shauna stood, arms crossed. You're trying to ruin us. No, Kaylin said. I'm trying to stop you from ruining me. She reached into the folder and pulled out the final document, a city records filing. And as of 9:04 this morning, there's a property hold placed with the county recorder's office. No sale or title transfer can proceed until the fraud claim is resolved. Marla stared at the page like it was a death certificate. You'll have 48 hours, Kaylin said calmly. To vacate the house. Excuse me, Shauna spat. You heard me, Kaylin replied. You have 2 days to gather your things and leave the premises. After that, the locks will be changed and the house secured. This isn't personal, it's protective. For everyone. You're out of your mind, Shauna said. We lived in this project. We bled for it. We made it beautiful. And you did it with stolen tools, Callan said, voice steady. You trespassed on my credit, forged my name, opened an LLC in my identity, and tied my financial future to a house I wasn't even allowed to walk through. This isn't a flip, it's a con. Rita appeared then, arms folded tightly as she stood near the staircase. Her face was pinched with something between fear and disbelief. This doesn't feel like you, baby, she said. You've always been the quiet one, the patient one. Callan looked at her mother, her voice soft but unshakable. Maybe that's why it was so easy, because you all thought I'd stay quiet no matter what. Rita took a half step forward. But family. This isn't about family, Callan said. This is about accountability, and I'm done being everyone's backup plan. She turned back to Shauna and Marla. All you ever had to do was ask, and I probably would have helped. I've helped before too many times. I helped you through your second divorce, Shauna, even though I couldn't afford it. I helped when Mom's car needed replacing. I've always been there, but none of you wanted help. You wanted access. Shauna's mouth opened, but Callan kept going. You didn't want a conversation. You wanted a shortcut. A way to bypass your bad credit, your overdrawn accounts, your refusal to think beyond next week. And I was convenient because I'm careful. Because I have good credit. Because I don't complain. Marla was crying now quietly. But I'm not your bank, Callan said. And I'm not your silent partner. The room hung in that moment still and raw. You can hate me for this, Callan added. But what you can't do is pretend I deserved it. That this was normal, that what you did was anything but wrong. She stood up, folder under her arm again. I'll come back Thursday morning with a locksmith. I hope truly that by then you'll have cleared out what's yours and left what isn't. Without another word, she walked toward the door. The heels of her flats echoed slightly across the hardwood Shauna had chosen without consulting her. As she stepped onto the porch, the wind picked up slightly. Riverwood was quiet, save for the rustling of trees and the distant hum of a lawnmower. Somewhere nearby, a bird chirped, the kind of ordinary sound that felt like punctuation. Back in the house behind closed doors, she imagined the blame was already flying again. But she didn't care. Not anymore. Because for the first time in a long time, she had done more than just react. She had drawn a line, enforced it, protected herself. And that didn't make her heartless. It made her whole. By Thursday afternoon, the for sale sign was gone, pulled from the front yard with the kind of haste that suggested someone at Kinsey & Moore had received more than just a call, they'd likely received legal notice. The listing was marked temporarily off-market on every major platform by Friday morning, and Callan knew the whispers had already begun within the Riverwood real estate circuit. It didn't take much for word to spread in a town like that, especially when a house looked that perfect on the outside, and came apart the moment you opened the books. The contractor's office filed a formal breach of contract complaint the following week. Apparently, once the loan was frozen, payments stalled. 2 crews hadn't been paid for the last phase of work, one of them posted publicly on their business page. This is why we demand verified clients. Don't let the pretty exterior fool you. It stung a little. Not because it wasn't true, but because her name had been attached to it all along. The bank's fraud department moved faster than she expected. Within days of Callan submitting the scanned signature comparisons and forged authorization emails, her case was escalated to a senior officer. Her credit card flagged the LLC tie as suspicious. She wasn't liable yet, but they'd said in their call, if anything else surfaces tied to this entity, we may need sworn affidavits. Possibly a police report. She was keeping everything documented. A folder on her desktop read, just in case. Then came the post. It was a Sunday morning, again. Like it always was, somehow these moments of tension draped in quiet hours. Callan was sipping her second coffee on the back deck of her Richmond apartment when she saw it. Shauna's Facebook post had no names, no direct accusations, just the usual weaponized vagueness. Some people confuse being right with being kind. Just because you have resources doesn't mean you get to tear others down. This was our dream, and I'm sorry if protecting that makes me the villain. The comment thread was worse, filled with nods from old church friends, vague sympathy from cousins who had no clue what had actually happened, and one particularly stinging line from a neighbor back home: "Families don't sue families." Callan didn't reply. She didn't even screenshot it. There was nothing she needed from that post, nothing she didn't already know. Marla didn't post. She didn't say anything at all. But a few days later, when Callan went to send her a scan of one last bank statement, just in case she wanted to come clean or cooperate, she found her blocked. No profile, no last name, nothing. Just gone. Callan stared at the screen for a long time, her thumb hovering over her mouse. Not from surprise exactly, but from the weight of what it meant, not even a conversation, just a disappearing act. Later that week, she started going through old photo boxes, the ones she brought back from her grandmother's attic the year after college. Dusty edges, faded labels. She hadn't opened them in years. There were pictures of them as kids. Shauna wild-haired and grinning with watermelon juice on her cheeks. Marla awkward and tall, too early, and Callan arms folded in nearly every shot, always half a step to the side, always holding something, someone else's sweater, a napkin, a map. She remembered summer nights in that house. The creak of the screen door, the scent of tomato vines. She remembered how her grandmother would brush her hair with slow, deliberate strokes and say, "This house will keep breathing long after I do. So take care of it like it's got lungs." Back then, Callan thought legacy meant real estate, generational value, something you could flip or claim. But sitting there now in her small city apartment with a file of legal documents on one side and old Polaroids on the other, she realized the house had never been about money. It had been about memory, about care, about showing up, and you couldn't fake that with granite countertops or walk-in pantries. They had tried. Her sisters had tried to turn heritage into leverage, but in the end, all they'd done was gut the place that once held them. And as Callan sat in the quiet, surrounded by the only truths that ever mattered, she whispered aloud, "This house had lungs. And now it can breathe again." She didn't know what would happen next. Whether the fraud investigation would lead to court. Whether the house would eventually be sold, repurposed, or sit empty. But she knew one thing. She had finally learned how to protect something worth keeping herself. Fall came early that year in Georgia, or maybe it just felt that way to Callan. The air at Riverwood was lighter, the sky a paler blue. The trees lining the street had started turning gold and rust creeping in at the edges. And the house, still standing quiet now, looked different too. Not because anything had changed structurally, but because it finally felt like it belonged to her again. The decision not to sell hadn't been easy. Every practical voice in her head had argued otherwise. Liquidate, reclaim the financial loss, cut ties, walk away. But when she sat in the empty living room again, walls still smelling faintly of fresh paint, Callan saw something else possibility. The idea came slowly, not as a light bulb moment, but more like sediment settling. It began with a phrase she'd written in her fraud dispute letter, "Financial control without consent is abuse." She'd written it clinically, but it lingered, became something personal. She started drafting quietly, privately. A project proposal, a mission statement, an LLC not forged this time, registered correctly, authentically. It would be called Drummond Place, not a shelter. something quieter. A short-term housing program for women who had left family-based financial abuse, who had nowhere to go, or whose credit had been destroyed by the people who once called them loved ones. Not revenge, not rescue, just a place to breathe again. Callan called Uncle Tyree first. He answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd reach out again," he said with a low chuckle. "You sound like someone with a plan." "I do," she said, "but I'm gonna need help." He came on as a consultant, unpaid, at first, insisting families supposed to build, not borrow and betray. He helped her file the new paperwork, navigate the zoning requirements review, legal language for liability and occupancy limits. He even connected her with a few regional social workers, one of whom emailed Callan a week later with a referral. The first resident arrived on a Tuesday. Her name was Tisha, late 20s, a single mother from Savannah. Her ex-husband had drained her savings, maxed out a joint credit card under her name, and left her with an eviction notice taped to the fridge. She arrived with 2 duffel bags, a toddler on her hip, and the kind of wary eyes that said, "I'm tired of kindness," with strings attached. Callan didn't ask for details. She just gave her the keys, showed her the guest room, and pointed out the coffee machine. "Stay 3 months," she said. "Longer if needed. No rent, no pressure, just reset." Tisha stared at her like she didn't quite believe it, then whispered, "This is yours." "It was my grandmother's," Callan replied. "Then it got complicated. But now, yeah, it's mine again." That night, Callan sat on the porch swing with her laptop and a notepad. The autumn breeze rustled the magnolia trees. Somewhere inside, Tisha's son was giggling at a cartoon. The house was quiet in a different way now. Not abandoned, not betrayed, just beginning. She looked out across the lawn and thought about all the things this house had once held. Family holidays, fights, laughter, long summers, grief, misuse, and now maybe healing. Legacy wasn't always about who came before you. Sometimes it was about what you built when everything fell apart. She thought about Shauna's rant, Marla's silence, her mother's sad eyes. She hadn't heard from any of them in weeks. There were still decisions to be made, possibly even charges to be filed, but she was no longer checking her email obsessively. No longer refreshing the credit monitoring dashboard hourly. That wasn't where peace came from. Peace came from turning damage into direction, from deciding that what had happened to her didn't have to end with her. She closed her notebook, and for the first time in a long time, Callan Drummond felt not just safe but steady. This wasn't the future she thought she'd inherited. It was the one she chose. The new deed arrived on a Friday afternoon, not the old forged one, not a rushed scan someone slipped into a folder with borrowed authority. This was real, stamped, certified, and signed by Callan Drummond in her own unmistakable hand. She ran her thumb along the edge of the envelope as she stood in the front hallway of the Riverwood house. Light filtered in through the high front windows, catching on the refinished floors, the warm amber of the living room walls, the tiny flecks of dust dancing through the air like motes of memory. She didn't cry. She thought she might, but instead she breathed slow and full. The kind of breath you take after holding something in for too long. It had taken months to untangle it all. The LLC was officially dissolved after mediation. The bank formally removed the loan from her record and reassigned the debt to Shauna and Marla, pending their own creditworthiness, which Callan suspected would not carry them far. She hadn't pressed charges, though she'd had every right to. Instead, she chose documentation, clarity, and boundaries. That was enough. More than enough. A few days after the final filing, she received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address, but she recognized the careful penmanship. It was from the site foreman, the same man who'd casually greeted her that first visit back the day she realized They'd started phase 3 without her. His letter was brief but sincere. Ms. Drummond, I've worked on a lot of family homes. Usually people cut corners, hide things, but when we found out what happened and you still made sure the crews were paid in full on time, I just wanted to say thank you. That kind of integrity is rare these days. You could have let it fall apart. But you didn't. Good luck with whatever this place becomes. Wes. Callan folded the note gently and tucked it into the drawer beside the kitchen sink. It wasn't validation she needed, but it felt like something had landed where it belonged. That evening, she stayed in the house alone. No guests, no paperwork, no calls, just a casserole she'd made earlier, a glass of red wine, and a candle flickering on the end table. She sat in the armchair facing the window, where the hydrangeas were beginning to bloom again in the side yard. Tisha had planted them. She said she liked the way they changed colors with the soil, how they adapted depending on what they were given. Callan thought about that a lot lately, about how people change, how sometimes change isn't about becoming someone new, but finally being seen for who you already were. She glanced down at the new deed beside her wine glass. Her name, printed there, full, clear, undistorted. Callan Yvette Drummond, owner. No forged middle initial, no shadow company, no sibling signatures tucked beside hers. Just her name. And this time, she had signed it knowingly. She thought of her grandmother, Miss Ora May, who used to tell her, "Be careful what name you build with. 'Cause names don't just tell people who you are, they tell you who you answer to." She answered to herself now, to her work, to her voice, to the boundaries she once felt guilty drawing and now saw as sacred. She didn't miss Shauna's excuses, or Marla's half-hearted apologies, or her mother's conditional affection. What she missed, if anything, was the illusion that things might one day have been different, that they would have chosen love over entitlement. She'd grieved that part already. The house was quiet, but not hollow. It held new stories now, and space for more. Callan raised her glass slowly, not to anyone else, not for show, just a soft, proud gesture to the room, to the woman she had become, to the name they tried to steal, she whispered, and the woman who took it back. She drank slowly, then smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because she was finally whole. They used her name without asking. But this time, she signed the deed with full knowledge, and it didn't bind her to them. It set her free.